are going to get through this.
Easy for listening. I was able to do it.
Easy for dancing.
I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Have You or Say, one-on-one shadowboxing. Here we are in the West Television studios, and our guest today is Stephen Breen, who is in education more than 42 years, and he is the member of the Australian Primary Principals Association. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Obviously, everyone can guess, after this introduction, we're going to talk about education in this episode. Education is a big matter all around the world. Politicians hype it up, and everyone is realizing how much every country is behind education. The third world countries now these days are front of education instead of the Western world. Why is that, Steve? What's wrong with our education?
Well, in fact, I don't think there's much wrong. I think we have to actually do a few things around the edges. It's interesting when you have a look at PISA, which is the big international measurement, TIMS, which is a mathematics, you actually find league tables which are developed.
Yes.
You've got to be a bit careful about the league tables. Like in the last PISA test, Kazakhstan was above Australia.
Yes.
It was very interesting, and if you looked into the fine...
They like more the pizza than us.
Well, if you look into the fine details, they find that all the high socioeconomic children within that country did the test, and none of the low socioeconomic. But in Australia, we have 30, 30, 30. So, look,
So it's a mixture of every
However,
thing.
I will say that we are flatlining. There's no two ways about it. A lot of the Western countries are flatlining. That
What
means,
is that and
well,
why?
basically, if you look at the results from 1993 through to 2016, we haven't improved greatly, where other countries have improved. So we have introduced processes and policies that, if you look at it quite clearly, they haven't worked.
But they're spending lots of money on education, on courses and introducing things, yes.
They're spending billions of dollars.
So why we need to spend more and more money on the same task, which is in primary schools, get the kids to learn the basics and master that when they are year 7 or 6 now these days, because high school starts a year earlier. So what is wrong? I mean, what's so difficult to teach the kids to read, write, do some maths, some social knowledge, and live in harmony with each other?
We spend a fair bit of money on education. It depends on where you spend the money. Well, interestingly, if you look at the stats, Australia spends less on average than the OECD on education, but we won't want to go to the fine bit. But basically, it's where you actually put the money in education and what you put on top of it. So in Australia, like in America, like in England, we have what's called accountability, and it comes over the top with the NAPLAN tests and the My School website. The high-performing countries don't have those. They have internal accountability. We've got external accountability.
Internal is mean accountable in the school
In the school.
Teaching, learning, and that's it.
Yes.
If it's good, everything is good.
Yeah. So if you have a harmonious whole teacher, whole school approach, it gets along quite. So you look at Finland, you look at Canada. A lot of the Canadian provinces do very, very well. A lot of the Eastern Asian countries do very well. Australia have a lot of external accountability, like America, right? We will have the big test, and we'll have the big league table. And what people then do is they concentrate on a couple of little areas. When we're looking at education, we have to, and the child, we have to look at music, we have to look at phys ed, we have to look at literacy, numeracy, social studies, all of those sorts of things. What's actually happening is that we're narrowing down into a couple of little areas. We need to change that. And I think a lot of people understand that. Unfortunately, a lot of our politicians don't.
So is this whole structure in the United States and in here, for example, it's part of bureaucracy?
I think so, yes. Basically an inflexible bureaucracy.
The external
Yeah, yeah,
assessment
yeah,
of everything and make it sure it's working, at least on paper.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that you see, Tibor, is that if you have a country that has quality, or how would we say, they have everyone who is basically a level,
Yes.
and here we're talking about the Scandinavian countries and Canada. You have fairly good education outcomes. If you have a group of people, a class that is way above and way down, so you've got inequality, you have some problems in education.
I think these problems are serious problems.
Very serious, very serious.
But somehow politicians could not realize or recognize what the real problem is. Why don't the politicians talking more to the teachers, and why don't let them do their job?
If only, Tibor, if only.
Just a simple question. I don't want to be...
I'll give you an example. In
Yes.
Ontario, the Premier there decided to have a look at education, and he got a lot of experts, world experts around, and they talked about it for a while and then developed a big plan over 10 years. In Australia, they get probably some political advisors together in a room, smoky room, and say, we'll introduce this because it's quite good politically.
Yes,
sense.
Minister.
Yeah, yes, Minister. The type.
It's very good, very good. And the kids not learning from that.
Well, you know, we're still up there. We're still up there, but we are.
Okay, we are not
we're-
on the bottom.
Yeah, we are flatlining. We are going like that where we should go like, you know.
And how much you can go upwards?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? You know,
It is.
what do you go to 110%?
Yeah, so what is your aim? So what is the
improvement.
race of?
Improvement.
Improvement.
If you look at the PISA test, which
But
is...
if we're flatlining now
Yeah.
and we spend billions of dollars to improve what we're looking at, improvement, and it's not happening, someone is seriously fucked up the whole thing.
Well, we got some problems. We got some problems, and we need to actually go back to basics, not necessarily the basics of literacy and numeracy, but actually how children learn.
Yes?
And they...
But that's what we know and learned in thousands and thousands of years. How children learn,
We
where
complicate-
they are learning from, and what they need to learn.
We complicate education. It all
that
happens,
complicates.
and the research around the world, Professor John Hattie
Yes.
has done a lot of research. It's actually about the classroom teacher and what the classroom teacher, the relationships that they have with the children. That's what it's all about. We talk about and we put money into all of these other things. We actually have to look at the relationships.
And what is the level of the relationship currently?
It's pretty good,
Yes.
but one of the problems that we've got is that we've got diversity now. We've got a lot of social issues. You look in the newspaper now, all of those social issues that have come out, they come into the school. So
They divide a bit.
a bit, yes, yeah. We have to change the way that we are actually teaching. So it's professional learning for the teachers about the changing ways. We can't keep the status quo that we did in the 50s and the 60s.
As multicultural as possible.
Yeah, oh, of course, well, my thought is that a child is a child is a child, right?
Yes.
When they come to school, they're pretty pure, and you've actually got to mould them with the learning.
But when they're leaving the primary school, which is mainly our bastion, we got unsatisfied
We've got a lot
parents and kids
Yeah.
with their knowledge when they want to enter into high school.
Put it this way, we are flatlining. You know, we're not
Flatlining.
going backwards, we're going like that. Our aim is to actually improve. How to do that is a $64,000 question in that regard.
Definitely not more money. Something else is missing because
Something is missing, and I agree with that. Although I will say once again, Australia is below the OECD in actually what they spend on education. But we've got a very, very advanced society here compared to a lot of the countries in the
Yes.
OECD.
how much technology comes into the education of the primary school kids? Because in Europe now they're thinking ahead and they say we have to start in primary and then we develop something which is much different and much better and quicker than the previous regimes.
Well, one of the issues of that is that when do you actually teach children? And in fact, if you actually look at it, probably school's not the best place to actually do that because in the first 5 years is where children learn the most. and that's research from brain.
That's correct.
Yeah. So
I heard that before.
yeah, and in fact, there are people around the world who actually have proved that, in long-term studies. The issue is that now in schools we have, unlike when I first started in the 70s, very early 70s, we had the children who were all capable of learning that particular thing. We now have a huge range of children. We have refugee children, we have children with disabilities, which is a huge area, and what we need to do is actually re-evaluate how we're actually teaching those 30 children in the class. So for the disability children, we have something like now about 1 in 5 of our children in our schools has a disability.
Some form.
In some form. It could be medical, it could be behavioural, it could be autistic, it could be dyslexia, it could be vision, it could be sight, it could be hearing. What we've got is them all into our classrooms. 90% of all the children in Australia are now mainstreamed in their classrooms. Okay?
On that note, Stephen, we have to go for a short break, but please stay with us because after the break we're coming back to talk to Stephen about disability at the primary schools in Australia and the problems what made this course.